me and my shadow.
And I say, here's to you, Sam. You know I love you. I can't say it any more than that. You're my brother. And you're the greatest.
He is probably one of the most honest individuals I've ever met in my life. And I honor his friendship and what he did for me as a performer and as a person too.
After 35 years, a Resurfaced interview finally confirms the bond between Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. that Hollywood desperately tried to hide.
A room this size full of dynamite could blow us apart again because he was always there for me. He was there professionally and he was there personally.
They shared hotel rooms during segregation. Frank risked everything defending Sammy from mob threats. When Sammy died, Frank was so broken he couldn't even speak at the funeral.
How do you think Sammy should be remembered?
Well, from my standpoint, he should be remembered as one of the finest human beings I ever knew in my life.
The entire Rat Pack knew. But when Sammy finally told his truth in that lost interview, powerful people made sure it disappeared. Until now. So let's get into it. The year was 1941, and America was still trying to figure out where it stood in a world at war. On a small stage in Harlem, two entertainers from completely different worlds were about to meet for the first time and change each other's lives forever. Sammy Davis Jr. was just 15 years old, a kid who'd been performing since he could barely walk. Born into vaudeville with his father, Sammy Sr., and adopted Uncle Will Maston, little Sammy had never known a world outside the stage. By age 3, he was already dancing and singing his heart out, bringing audiences to their feet with talent that seemed impossible for someone so young. But being talented and being black in 1941, America meant living in two different realities. No matter how good Sammy was, and he was extraordinary, segregation made sure he never forgot his place. The best venues wouldn't let him walk through the front door. The finest hotels wouldn't give him a room. He could be the star of the show and still be forced to sleep in his car afterward.
Santa Claus is coming to town.
The humiliation followed a predictable pattern. Sammy would arrive at a venue and be directed to the service entrance, like he was delivering groceries instead of headlining the show. He'd perform his heart out, bringing audiences to their feet with his incredible dancing, his perfect impressions, his soulful singing. The crowd would go wild, demanding encore after encore. But when the curtain fell, he'd be escorted back to that same service door, reminded once again that his talent couldn't overcome the color of his skin. Meanwhile, Frank Sinatra was experiencing the exact opposite trajectory. Born in Hoboken, New Jersey to Italian immigrant parents, the skinny kid with the piercing blue eyes was becoming America's heartthrob. His smooth voice and undeniable charisma had teenage girls fainting at his concerts. By the early 1940s, he was already a household name, crooning his way into the hearts of millions. When their paths crossed for the first time that night in 1941, it should have been just another gig. Frank was 25, singing with Tommy Dorsey and his orchestra at the height of the big band era. Sammy was the teenage sensation with the Will Maston Trio, scheduled to open the show. They were on the same bill, but they might as well have been living on different planets.
And I say, here's to you, Sam. You know I love you. I can't say it any more than that. You're my brother. And you're the greatest.
Frank watched from the wings as this teenage dynamo commanded the stage with a presence that defied his age. Sammy could sing, dance, play multiple instruments, and do impressions that left audiences screaming for more. He was a one-man entertainment machine, and Frank knew he was witnessing something special. But what struck Frank most wasn't just Sammy's talent. It was his resilience. Despite the racism, despite the humiliation, despite being treated like a second-class citizen, Sammy performed with joy, with passion, with an energy that seemed impossible given his circumstances. That night, they exchanged only a few words backstage. Frank complimented Sammy's performance, and Sammy thanked him with the kind of genuine gratitude that comes from rarely receiving recognition from white performers. It was a brief interaction, but something connected between them, a mutual recognition of talent, determination, and the loneliness that comes with life in the spotlight. But it would be years before their friendship truly began. First, they both had to navigate the treacherous waters of show business. Frank, with his meteoric rise to fame and eventual career struggles in the late 1940s, and Sammy with his fight for recognition in a world that wanted to keep him invisible. The 1940s and early 1950s were brutal for black entertainers. Sammy would later recall the countless nights when he'd bring down the house with his performance, only to be told he couldn't stay in the hotel where he'd just entertained hundreds of people. Instead, he'd have to drive across town, sometimes miles away, just to find a place that would rent him a room for the night. He'd eat cold sandwiches in his car while white performers enjoyed elaborate dinners in the hotel restaurant. The humiliation was constant and deliberate. It didn't matter that audiences loved him. It didn't matter that his talent was undeniable. In the eyes of a segregated society, he was still just another black performer who needed to know his place. But Frank Sinatra was about to change all of that. By the late 1940s, as both men's careers were taking off in different directions, Frank made a decision that would alter the course of entertainment history. He decided that talent trumped everything else, and he was willing to put his own reputation on the line to prove it. The stage was set for a friendship that would challenge America's deepest prejudices and create a bond that death itself couldn't break. By the late 1940s, Frank Sinatra had evolved from teen heartthrob to serious artist. His career had its ups and downs. The Bobby Soxer hysteria had faded, and he was fighting to prove he was more than just a pretty voice. His personal life was equally turbulent, marked by a tumultuous marriage to Nancy Barbado and a passionate affair with Ava Gardner that dominated tabloid headlines. But through all the chaos, Frank maintained his core values, especially when it came to recognizing real talent. When he reconnected with Sammy Davis Jr. in the late 1940s, Frank saw something that the rest of America was blind to: a performer whose gifts transcended race, whose artistry deserved the same respect and opportunities as any white entertainer. Sammy had grown from that talented teenager into a complete entertainer. He could sing any style, dance like he was floating on air, play drums, trumpet, and piano, and do impressions so perfect they seemed like magic. Their friendship began with small gestures that were actually revolutionary for the time. Frank would invite Sammy to sit at his table in restaurants where black patrons were usually turned away. He'd walk through the front door with him at clubs that normally forced black performers to use the service entrance. When they traveled together, Frank made sure they stayed at the same hotels. And if Sammy wasn't welcome, Frank wouldn't stay either. These weren't publicity stunts or calculated moves for Frank's career. In fact, they were dangerous to his reputation. Supporting a black entertainer so openly could have cost him bookings, record deals, and fans. Italian Americans were still fighting for acceptance themselves in many parts of the country, and Frank's association with Sammy gave his critics ammunition to attack him. But Frank didn't care about the potential backlash. He was operating on a simple principle. Sammy was his friend, and friends didn't abandon each other.
I don't think that a room this size full of dynamite could blow us apart again, because he was always there for me. He was there professionally and he was there personally.
Behind the scenes, away from the crowds and the cameras, Frank and Sammy had developed a connection that went beyond show business. They confided in each other about their struggles, their dreams, and their fears. Frank became the big brother Sammy never had, while Sammy brought joy and energy to Frank's sometimes brooding personality. They could sit for hours talking about music, about life, about the pressures of fame that few people could understand. Frank's protection of Sammy extended beyond public gestures. When Sammy faced financial troubles early in his career, Frank quietly helped with loans that were never publicized. When Sammy struggled with self-doubt, wondering if he'd ever be accepted as more than a novelty act, Frank was there with encouragement and connections. He introduced Sammy to important people in the industry, vouched for his professionalism, and made it clear that disrespecting Sammy meant disrespecting Frank Sinatra. Their friendship was reshaping the entertainment industry from the inside. When Frank Sinatra, one of the biggest stars in America, treated Sammy Davis Jr. as an equal, it forced others to take notice. Slowly, reluctantly, some doors began to open. Not because society had suddenly become enlightened, but because Frank's influence made discrimination expensive. The transformation wasn't always smooth. There were arguments, misunderstandings, and moments when the pressure seemed too much for both of them. Frank's defense of Sammy sometimes came across as paternalistic, which frustrated Sammy's fierce independence. Sammy occasionally felt like he was being treated as Frank's pet project rather than his equal. But through all the friction, their core connection remained unshakable. Their friendship was becoming the foundation for something bigger than either of them imagined. Soon, they would be joined by other entertainers who shared their vision of a different kind of show business. One where talent mattered more than skin color, where friendship transcended society's rules, where the old barriers could be broken down through sheer force of personality and mutual respect. The Rat Pack was about to be born, and Frank and Sammy's Brotherhood would be its beating heart. A relationship so powerful it would change entertainment forever, while generating whispers that would follow them both to their graves. When Dean Martin, Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop joined Frank and Sammy in the early 1960s, the Rat Pack was officially born.
No. The guy in the back can't hear you. Go ahead, a little more, baby. Loosen up.
They were the coolest group in America. 5 men who seemed to have it all. They ruled Las Vegas like kings, dominated Hollywood like gods, and made being effortlessly sophisticated look as easy as breathing. But within that legendary group, no relationship was quite like the one between Frank and Sammy. The Rat Pack's Vegas shows at the Sands Hotel became the stuff of legend. They'd film Ocean's 11 during the day and take over the Copa Room by night, creating an atmosphere of controlled chaos that felt like the ultimate insider party. Everyone wanted to be them or be around them. The shows were loose, unpredictable, and electric. 5 friends having the time of their lives while audiences paid premium prices to watch. But observers noticed something different about Frank and Sammy's dynamic. While Dean played the lovable drunk, Peter brought Hollywood glamour, and Joey delivered the punchlines. Frank and Sammy shared moments that seemed deeper, more intimate than the others. They'd whisper in each other's ears during performances, share private jokes that excluded everyone else, and embrace with an intensity that made people uncomfortable. Their most powerful symbol was their duet of "Me and My Shadow." It became their signature song, but it was more than entertainment. It was a statement.
Me and my shadow.
Frank, the white megastar, and Sammy, the black entertainer fighting through racism, standing together as equals. The lyrics spoke of companionship, of always being there for each other, and audiences could feel the genuine emotion behind every word. When they performed it, the rest of the world seemed to disappear. Yet the performance also highlighted the complexity of their relationship. While Frank never treated Sammy as anything less than family, the outside world often saw their dynamic differently. To many, Sammy appeared to be Frank's shadow, talented certainly, but always in the background while Sinatra commanded the spotlight. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, but they transformed even that perception into art. Behind the scenes, their connection was raising eyebrows and generating whispers throughout Hollywood. This was the 1950s and early 1960s, when men weren't supposed to show deep emotional intimacy with each other. Masculinity was defined by emotional distance, by competition, by keeping your feelings locked away. But Frank and Sammy broke those rules constantly. The rumors grew stronger as people noticed patterns. Frank's fierce defense of Sammy went beyond professional courtesy or even close friendship. When Sammy faced racism, Frank didn't just speak up. He fought back with the fury of someone whose heart was being attacked. When Sammy struggled with personal demons, Frank was always there, no matter what it cost him, no matter how it looked to outsiders. Of course, neither Frank nor Sammy ever addressed the speculation directly. In an era when homosexuality was not just taboo but illegal in many states, discretion wasn't just wise, it was survival. Any admission of a relationship beyond friendship would have destroyed both their careers and potentially put them in physical danger. But their love for each other, whatever its exact nature, was impossible to hide completely. It showed in the way Frank's face lit up when Sammy entered a room. It showed in the way Sammy's entire demeanor changed when Frank was around. More confident, more relaxed, more himself. It showed in countless small moments that people noticed but didn't dare discuss openly. What was undeniable was the depth of their connection. Frank had many friends, many professional relationships, many women in his life. But his bond with Sammy was unique, protective, passionate, and unwavering. It was the kind of devotion that transcended categories and defied easy explanation. Whether it was brotherhood, romance, or something entirely their own, Frank and Sammy had found in each other something that most people spend their whole lives searching for. And as the world watched, whispered, and wondered, they continued to stand together against everything that tried to tear them apart. While the world speculated about Frank and Sammy's relationship, Sammy's romantic life with women was creating its own set of scandals and life-threatening situations. His choices in love would repeatedly put him in mortal danger and test the limits of even Frank's ability to protect him from a hostile world. The first major crisis came in 1957, when Sammy began dating Kim Novak, one of Hollywood's biggest stars. She was beautiful, blonde, and about to star in Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. He was a rising black entertainer, breaking barriers, but still fighting for acceptance. Their relationship was passionate, genuine, and absolutely explosive in 1950s America. They met at Chicago's Chez Parade nightclub, where Kim was enjoying a night out after finishing Vertigo. Sammy was performing with the Will Maston Trio, and from the stage, he locked eyes with the stunning actress. What started as flirtation became something deeper when Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh invited them both to a party. Kim later said she loved Sammy's youthful innocence and boyish qualities nobody else seemed to see in the dynamic performer. For months, they conducted a secret romance, meeting at a private Malibu beach house that Sammy rented specifically for their rendezvous. He would drive there, hidden under blankets on the floor of his car, desperate to avoid the prying eyes of photographers who would have destroyed both their careers with a single picture. When gossip columnists discovered their secret romance, the reaction was immediate and vicious. Interracial relationships were illegal in many states, and the mere suggestion of a black man dating a white movie star sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Headlines screamed about the kiss of death to Novak's career. Editorials demanded that Sammy stop seeing her immediately. But the real danger came from Columbia Pictures' chief Harry Cohn, who saw Novak as his property and Davis as a threat to his investment. Cohn was a ruthless studio executive with documented ties to organized crime. He wore matching ruby rings with gangster Johnny Roselli and wasn't hesitant to use violence to protect his interests. When threats and intimidation didn't work, Cohn escalated to a level that shocked even hardened Hollywood insiders. He put out a contract on Sammy's life. The message was delivered by gangster Mickey Cohen, who approached Sammy's father with chilling words. "Listen, I got some terrible news for you. I just got a call from Chicago to hurt Sammy. I tell you what, there's one chance. I'll give him 24 hours. Sammy has to get married to a colored girl." The threat wasn't just about breaking his legs or ending his career. They were talking about killing him. Arthur Silber Jr., one of Sammy's closest friends, later revealed the full extent of the danger. When Cohn found out about Kim and Sammy, he put a contract out, not to kill him really, but to break both his legs and to put out his other eye. Faced with the choice between love and survival, Sammy made the heartbreaking decision to end his relationship with Novak. In January 1958, just days after receiving the mob threat, he hastily married Lorraine White, a black dancer he barely knew. The marriage was a sham from the beginning, a desperate attempt to save his life and career. The wedding was a media spectacle that fooled no one. Sammy looked miserable throughout the ceremony. Lorraine seemed confused about why she was there. Everyone in Hollywood understood exactly what was happening, but nobody dared speak about it openly. Just 8 months later, they quietly divorced, but the damage was done. Kim Novak's career never fully recovered from the scandal, and Sammy carried the trauma of that forced choice for the rest of his life. 2 years later, Sammy found love again with Swedish actress May Britt. This time, he refused to back down. In 1960, they married in Frank's Hollywood Hills home, with Sinatra serving as best man. Frank's presence at the wedding was significant. He was putting his own reputation on the line by publicly supporting an interracial marriage that most of America condemned. The backlash was swift and severe. Death threats poured in daily. Bomb threats forced cancellations of Sammy's shows in Reno, San Francisco, and Chicago. The American Nazi Party picketed his performances with signs reading, "Go home, N." When he traveled to London with May, British fascists greeted them with the same hatred that had driven them from America. Even more painful was the political fallout. John F. Kennedy was running for president, and Frank had been working to get Sammy invited to Kennedy's inaugural gala. But after Sammy's marriage to May, the Kennedy team decided his presence would be too controversial and quietly disinvited him. It was a devastating blow that showed how even at the highest levels of American politics, Sammy's personal choices made him a liability that nobody wanted to be associated with. Constant protector and confidant. Whatever the true nature of their relationship, Frank's loyalty never wavered. He was there for every crisis, every heartbreak, every moment when Sammy needed someone who understood the unique pressures he faced. Their bond had survived mob threats, political scandals, and social upheaval, but their greatest test was still to come. By the late 1980s, the golden age of the Rat Pack was fading, but Frank and Sammy's friendship remained as strong as ever. In 1988, they embarked on what they called the Ultimate Event Tour. Frank, Dean Martin, and Sammy together on stage one last time. It was supposed to be a celebration, a victory lap for three men who had conquered the entertainment world. But Sammy was already fighting the battle that would claim his life. In August 1989, he was diagnosed with throat cancer, a cruel irony for a man whose voice had been his greatest gift. The disease progressed quickly, and by early 1990, complications from surgery had robbed him of his ability to speak. Frank watched helplessly as his closest friend faced this final challenge with the same grace and determination he'd shown throughout his life. Even as Sammy's health deteriorated, Frank continued to visit, continued to care, continued to be the brother he'd always been. On May 16, 1990, Sammy Davis Jr. passed away at his home in Beverly Hills. He was 64 years old, having packed several lifetimes of achievement, struggle, and love into those years. For Frank, who had built a reputation as Hollywood's toughest guy, the loss was devastating. The funeral was held at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Hollywood's biggest names came to pay their respects: Dean Martin, Michael Jackson, Gregory Hines, and dozens of others whose lives Sammy had touched. But all eyes were on Frank Sinatra, the man who had stood by Sammy through 4 decades of triumphs and struggles. Those who saw Frank that day said he looked utterly broken. The legendary coolness, the swagger, the commanding presence that had defined him for so long, all of it seemed to crumble in the face of this loss. He didn't speak during the service, but his grief was written across his face for everyone to see. Later, Frank released a statement that revealed the depth of his feelings. It is difficult to compress a friendship of more than 40 years into a few words. I wish the world could have known Sam as I did. Sam never gave less than 100% when he was on stage, and he gave even more to those of us lucky enough to call him friend. It was a generous God who gave him to us for all these years, and a heaven with his magic gives me warmth. Frank was so devastated that he immediately canceled his tour dates and flew to California for the funeral. People who knew him said they'd never seen him so lost, as if something fundamental had been taken from him. For nearly half a century, Sammy had been by his side through every high and low, and now that constant presence was gone forever. The true measure of their friendship wasn't in the speculation about its nature or the rumors that had followed them for decades. It was in moments like this, Frank's raw grief at losing the person who had understood him better than anyone else. Whether they were best friends, brothers, or something more, their love for each other was undeniable and profound. In the years that followed, whenever Frank spoke about Sammy, his voice would soften with a tenderness that few people ever saw. He'd talk about Sammy's talent, his courage, his loyalty, but mostly he'd talk about how much he missed his friend. Their friendship had defied every social convention of their time. It had survived racism, mob threats, political pressure, and personal scandals. It had changed the entertainment industry and challenged America's deepest prejudices. But most importantly, it had given 2 extraordinary men something that all the fame and success in the world couldn't buy: unconditional love and understanding. The Resurfaced interview that brought their story back to light confirms what many had suspected all along, that Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. shared something that transcended easy categorization. In a world that tried to keep them apart, they chose to stand together. In an industry that profited from division, they created unity. In a society that feared their bond, they refused to let go. 35 years after that final goodbye, their story continues to inspire and challenge us. It reminds us that love comes in many forms, that friendship can change the world, and that some connections are powerful enough to outlast even death itself. Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr., 2 men who found in each other exactly what they needed to survive an impossible world. Their legacy isn't just in the music they made or the barriers they broke, but in the proof they offered that when 2 people truly understand each other, nothing can tear them apart. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.